Well, and therapeutics. I mean, you tell me, but I almost would prefer the therapeutics even first. You go into the hospital, you make people better. But we're doing very well with remdesivir and other things. The steroids are turning out to be great. Plasma is turning out to be really good. We've made tremendous progress.
There it is, President Trump saying tremendous progress has been made on vaccines and therapeutics, which comes after the government announced it will pay pharmaceutical company Pfizer nearly $2 billion to make and deliver 100 million doses of its COVID-19 vaccine. Dr. John Campbell, former nurse lecturer and health analyst, he's joining us live to weigh in. Doctor, thanks so much for coming on. It's good to see you again.
Pleasure.
Yeah, this contract is part of Operation Warp Speed, which you know of, which the U.S. government's plan here to quickly ramp up development of vaccines. How promising is this news with Pfizer?
It's interesting. This Operation Warp Speed is kind of a program to get a vaccine by the end of the year, by the end of 2020. And what the US government are doing is very similar to what the UK government are doing, is they're kind of backing several horses, really, because they're not quite sure which one's going to win. So the United States is financing the Oxford University AstraZeneca vaccine and the Pfizer one, as you've said, which is the collaboration with BioNTech, the German company. And of course, it's also interested in the Moderna one as well. And any vaccine which actually passes muster and is actually used will have to prove to be safe. It will have to be demonstrated with phase 3 placebo-controlled trials that it works, 50% effectiveness, and of course it'll have to be FDA approved. Now, this particular one, this Pfizer trial, it's actually a fairly early trial, but it's a remarkably promising trial. Now, it's non-randomized and it's only on a sample of 60 people. And they were all 18 to 55, so a fairly healthy age group. They were given 2 doses, but it did generate a really good immunoglobulin response, this IgG, which is this important antibody. And the antibody responses that this vaccine generated were actually better than people who are recovering from the virus. So it's looking remarkably promising. And the other thing that was very encouraging about this Pfizer vaccine, as well as getting the antibody response, which unfortunately we know is relatively short-lived, this Pfizer vaccine also stimulated the T-cell response. Now, the T-cell response is so important because this is the how-to part of it. This is the instruction to make the antibodies. So this may well last for many years, this form of immunity, if it's T-cell immunity, and that was showing positive. So it's quite promising. But we do have to remember it's at a relatively early stage. This was just 60 healthy volunteers. It will still need a more extensive phase 2 and phase 3.
Let me ask you this about that. The biggest question I have is you've got all these vaccines. You're going to get ready. You're going to go ahead and purchase them. And then they run through these next trials, the next phase of it. They notice something is wrong. What do? You just throw out all the doses and start again?
That's a very good point. Well, you wouldn't make too many doses. I mean, the US government wants 100 million of these vaccines, and I've heard they've put a sort of reserve in for another 500 million, 500 million doses. So they're probably only making relatively small amounts. But yeah, that's a real possibility. You could get to a point and you could say, well, no, this vaccine is actually too dangerous, or this vaccine is non-efficacious. And we won't know that until we get to phase 3 clinical trials, comparing it against the general population, against a placebo. Only then will we know. Until then, it looks promising. It's a good horse to bet, on, but it's not a guarantee by any means.
Well, let me ask you about this one. Before a vaccine is ready, treatments and therapeutics, very important, as you know. And the UK, that you kind of touched on, had successful results with interferon beta. I don't know if I'm saying that right.
Interferon beta, absolutely. Now, what happens when a cell is infected with a virus? That virally infected cell realizes it's infected and it releases this interferon. It's one of these cytokines you might have heard of. It's a cell-to-cell communication. And what it does is it gives the cells around about a heads up saying, just a minute, guys, there's a virus infection here. Get ready for it. And the cells around will be interfered with, and that will reduce their ability to produce new proteins, and it will reduce their ability to synthesize RNA. So if those cells become infected with the virus, what you've basically got is a firewall around the infected virus of other cells that are no longer able to produce cells. And as well as that, the interferon will make it more likely that any cell that is infected with a virus will just commit suicide. It's a process called apoptosis. So that's what's working on. You know, the thing that's really amazing here is this COVID-19 virus, it actually switches off that natural defense mechanism. You just couldn't make this stuff up. it switches that off. So this therapy is giving that back. It's giving it in an inhaled form. So the interferon is going to go straight to the lungs, exactly where it's needed, and kind of restore this antiviral property that the lungs are supposed to have. Now, the results from this are very preliminary. Now, this was not published in a scientific paper. The reason this was published is because it's a stock market requirement for this Synergen company in the UK. So the results kind of leaked out, as it were, but they are remarkably promising results. And it does make sense because of the way we understand that the interferon works and how this puts back, if you like, the missing interferon. And what they found was there was a 79% reduction in people that became severely ill who were given the interferon as opposed to the group that were given the placebo. Relatively small group, just 101 patients so far, but it's looking promising. And they were twice as likely to recover. The patients were less breathless. The patients given the interferon were discharged typically in 6 days rather than 9 days. But the key thing is this can be given at different phases of the illness. So it's not like dexamethasone, the steroid, that's given when the patient's already quite ill.
Yeah.
This can be given at a much earlier stage of the illness to prevent deterioration. So it's a remarkably promising treatment, but we still need the phase 3 trials until we know it works.
Yeah, very new. I know we use remdesivir here, and the one you mentioned earlier there. We'll see if that comes into play later. I'm out of time with you. That is Dr. John Campbell joining us live on a Thursday. Dr. John, good to see you. Thanks so much for coming on.
It was a pleasure.
Coming up, more